Assalamualaikum and hello to everyone. In today's video lesson, we will continue with Chapter 2 of our syllabus. We will continue with Subtopic 2.8, where we will look at the third air conditioning process, which is the heating and humidifying process. Now, as the name suggests, the third process involves a combination of heating and humidifying processes. Sometimes air needs to be humidified after a heating process in order to increase its humidity slightly. From the schematic diagram, we can see that the heating process takes place first, and after the heating process, water vapor in the form of steam will be sprayed by the humidifier, and as air passes through this section, it will absorb some of the moisture. The process path for the processes involved can also be illustrated using the psychometric chart as shown in the second figure. Now, for mass and energy balance equation, each process must be analyzed individually. For the heating section, it is basically the same as the simple heating process before, and the equations are as follows. At the humidifying section, for dry air, the mass flow rate will remain constant during the process. For water vapor, since water vapor m.w is added to the air, we must write it into the equation on the inlet side. Rearranging the equation will allow us to calculate the rate at which water vapor is added at the humidifying section. For energy balance, from the general SFEE, the equation can be reduced as shown in the slide. The enthalpy for water vapor, HW, is read from the property table. Now, let's look at the first example for the heating and humidifying process. Feel free to pause to read and understand the question properly. For step 1, please try to draw and label the schematic diagram for the air conditioning processes. Now, before we try to solve the question, we must first ask whether we should use the equations or can we use the psychometric chart to find the properties of air. For this question, since the air pressure is only 100 kilopascal, therefore we must use the equations to find the properties of air. For step 2, for rate of heat supply in the heating section, we can solve this by applying the energy balance equation. For mass flow rate of the steam in the humidifying section, we will use the water vapor mass balance equation at the humidifying section. For step 3, determine the required properties at each state. But before that, we must first calculate the mass flow rate for dry air using the equation written in red. The solution is shown in the slide here, where we can see that the mass flow rate for dry air is 55.2 kilograms per minute. Next, for step 3, we must determine the required properties at state 1 and state 2. For state 1, to solve for specific enthalpy, we first have to calculate the specific humidity. Using the required equation, we can solve for specific humidity, which we can see here gives the value 0.0023 kilograms vapor per kilograms dry air. For state 2, to calculate for enthalpy, we can then solve for enthalpy using the required equation, which we can see here gives the value 15.84 kilojoules per kg. For state 2, to calculate for enthalpy at state 2, we will use the same enthalpy equation, and it will give us the answer 27.95 kilojoules per kg. For state 3, we can solve for specific humidity by using the required equation just like in state 1, and the answer is 0.01206 kg vapor per kilogram dry air. For step 4, substitute the required values and solve for the question. Please ask if there are any questions later. Now, for the second example, you can pause the video to read and understand the question properly. For step 1, please try to draw and label the schematic diagram for the air conditioning process. Again, before we try to solve the question, we must first ask whether we should use the equations or the psychometric chart to find the properties of air. For this question, since the pressure is at 1 atm, we can use the psychometric chart to find the properties of air. We can also use the equations, however, it will take longer to solve the question. For step 2, the amount of steam added is determined by using the water vapor mass balance equation at the humidifying section. For amount of heat transfer to the air, the energy balance equation at the heating section will be used. For step 3, since the air pressure is at 1 atm, we will use the psychometric chart to find the properties of air at state 1, state 2, and state 3. Now, let's look at how to plot the chart for this question. First, locate and plot the properties for state 1. Make sure to draw the property line neatly. Next, since the first process is a heating process, draw a straight line until it reaches the temperature for state 2. Next, from the question, locate and plot for state 3. Then draw the process line connecting state 2 and state 3. Now, we can then draw and label the property lines which are required for state 1 and state 2. And then we can draw and label the property lines required at state 3. Now, read and list down the values for all of the required properties. This is how we are going to plot the psychometric chart for this process. For step 4, substitute and solve for the question. And as you can see, for amount of heat added, Q in equals to 5.1 kilojoules per kg. And for the amount of water vapor added, M.W equals to 0.0066 kg vapor per kilogram dry air. We have come to the end of this video lesson. We will continue with the remaining air conditioning processes in the next video. For exercises, please refer to the original notes. If there are any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. Thank you for your attention and have a good day.